There we go. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Flynn. Sorry about that stream key issue. Welcome to Adobe Live. It's great to have you here. If you are watching on Behance or YouTube, please, you can use the live chat if you want to say hi or have any questions as we're going along, because this is aimed at beginner-friendly stuff. So all questions are very, very welcome today. Without further ado, here's Jeremy Lord. Hello, Jeremy, again.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm very good.
Bit of a false live start there, but
we had a little practice run that we weren't actually live. So this is the take 2, and it's heaps better. Way less swearing. It's just so much better. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'll shorten my preamble. We'll just get stuck into it now because I've taken 5 minutes of your time, and I know you have lots to show today. So let's jump in. We're in Photoshop, live chat. Love to hear from you if you want to jump into chat while we're live today. And Jeremy Lord, take it away, my friend.
Thank you very much. So hey, everybody. So if you caught yesterday's stream, we went through these kind of very graphic styles, very approachable, quite sort of beginner friendly, not a whole lot of kind of Photoshop button pushing. So we went through this very kind of like graphic anime style, as well as this more kind of very like stylized, heavily kind of graphic styled illustration. Again, really simple kind of process there too. So today I'm going to continue that, and we're going to push into something that's kind of super fun to do. And that might help you if you're kind of short on ideas, and a little bit of a different way to explore kind of illustration and approach, I guess, how to draw forms and all that kind of stuff. So this is the illustration that I've got up here. It's kind of like fully colored, very kind of comic book style, very rough. As you can see, the line work is extremely kind of rough around the edges. But that's the kind of style that we're going for. And what this is basically kind of like what we call carving out. We start with a silhouette, and then instead of drawing with the kind of the outlines and the shading, which is what you're kind of seeing here as the result, we're actually going to be drawing more with the eraser and then kind of pushing and pulling shapes back into this. So how this starts is we start out with what we call kind of like silhouette drawing, which looks very random, and that's the point of this. This is like if you're stuck on your ideas, if you're not sure how to start your drawing, often you can get this kind of like writer's block equivalent kind of thing where you're not too sure, like you're looking at this blank page on your screen and you're not really sure kind of where to start and what to do. These kind of techniques can be super fun to do. And so what they consist of is basically just, it's kind of like Mr. Scriggle, kind of like just do a bunch of scribbling and kind of see what you can see in there or not. And like how can we add to this? How can we take away from this? So again, I'm just going to mess around with my eraser here and start carving out shapes of this to kind of see, like, am I seeing anything there? Okay, maybe yes, maybe no. If no, no biggie. It took a couple of seconds, no big deal. We can try something else a little bit different with a little bit of a different kind of shape language. So let's see what happens when we go all kind of horizontally kind of lines. Does that lend itself to something a little bit more kind of interesting and something that I could play around with? Potentially, like I'm starting to see maybe in here, like if I stick this on a new layer, I'm going to change my brush to something like this. Like I'm starting to see maybe like there could be an ear here. This could be a face, kind of like a neck, and like maybe there's a shoulder coming out of like an arm here. So there's potentially some sort of like beginning of a drawing there that I could look at kind of doing.
It's a bit like squinting your eyes and looking at clouds and kind of like figure out what do you like, see?
What am I seeing here? And it is really that kind of like this idea of Mr. Squiggle where like somebody will do this and it's like handed over to you. All right, what do you make a drawing of out of this? Like, what can you see? All right, maybe it's like some weird kind of toucan shape kind of thing with a tail. Like this is totally random. I would not advise doing this, obviously, if you were getting a client brief and like the client has briefed you on something specific, like you need to draw this character in this particular stance. This probably would not help you out. But it's a super fun way to approach just kind of like pure creation in terms of like, I'm just going to mess around and experiment with different ideas around this kind of swamp thing kind of thing. So I do have a little bit of an idea of kind of wanting to draw this like creature from the swamp kind of thing. And I'm seeing how that can go. So that's with a basic brush, but I can get some potentially more interesting kind of things going on if I swap that around to different brushes and kind of play with the settings and see what happens if I mess around with just, this kind of more like brushy type deal, like what gets created then and like what comes out of that. That could be a little bit of again, something to kind of unblock me.
Yeah.
And get me kind of going a little bit faster in there. And then the third way to do this is literally just going a little bit bonkers with the lasso tool and creating some shapes and then kind of squiggling all around inside that and then filling it and seeing like, does anything come out of that? Does anything happen when I do that in here? And like maybe I can start, carving out some shapes into this, and maybe there's a face there, and who knows what else is going on up here, like all these different kinds of things. So that's a really kind of interesting way to start. So let's go in and I'm going to grab, maybe I quite like the look of this one here. Like it's got like, it looks like he's got stuff growing out of him. He's got a weird kind of arm. There's stuff that I wouldn't normally do here, which is of interest to me.
Yeah.
And the shape. So I'm going to grab that.
I could totally see
Increase
like
the
some sort
size.
of kind of creature in like quite a lot of them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And like there's a little bit of guidance there. Like I do have like an intention going into it where like this dude could be like a kind of like a mushroom headed man, or like who knows what's kind of going on there. So there is a little bit of direction going on. It's not 100% random, but there's a lot of freedom in kind of exploring how these shapes work and how they come together. And even this idea here of like what I'm looking at over here with this particular thing is it looks like he's got kind of like vines dangling from him a little bit. That's a cool idea that I can kind of rip back and come in on. So let's start with this. I'm going to literally just attack this right now. I'm not going to make a new layer. I'm going to work immediately directly on this because I kind of want to preserve the spontaneousness of this a little bit. I don't want to clean it up too much. And this is one of the keys to this. So let's mess around a little bit more with shapes here. So I'm going to get a bigger brush. And I'm going to get my eraser, and my eraser is big enough. That's cool. I'm ready to go. All right, so let's start kind of getting a little bit more kind of shape in here. So I've got this arm. I want that to be a little bit more kind of forearm looking. Maybe we got a hint of a shoulder out here. That leg needs a little bit more. So this is where I'm going to start to kind of carve out some shapes. So we got the knee here and the calf. So this does potentially require a little bit of kind of knowledge of drawing and human anatomy and all those sorts of things. But again, it's not huge, and it's very, very loose kind of drawing style, and something that can be really super fun to execute going into it. And so now I'm just kind of carving out these shapes and seeing what I am resulting in. And
quickly get rid of that bit.
Yeah. I'm not going to get too paranoid about like cleaning this up properly. Like I kind of want a little bit of messiness around here and kind of like just that kind of vibe. And I think this kind of swamp creature type thing lends itself super well to this. Like these little extra bits of black, like, I don't know, they could be like flies buzzing around him, or just extra leaves and vines and stuff.
And just like mud falling out because he's just kind of risen out of the swamp.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm now going to quickly bring in some light back into this. So this is just a kind of a silhouette. It's kind of hard to see any kind of shapes that are going on here and what's happening. So let's bring in a little bit more of like, first off, where is his head? So like, is his head going to be like if I grab a different kind of brush here, maybe his head is this thing, right? So maybe his head is there and like his eyes are right here and like he's got some kind of weird thing, or maybe that's his like some really big weird kind of shoulder happening and his head's actually kind of hidden here. But we can't really see that because we don't have that information yet. So bringing in, and this is where it's going to be really awesome, bringing in some light into this is where this is really going to shine. So I'm going to put his head in the middle there and just bring in a little bit of lighting on here and just kind of block this out and kind of show some eyes. And he's kind of looking at us in there, and we've got a little bit of an ear. Maybe we've got some stuff going on his head too. And immediately you can kind of start to see like, and maybe we give him some teeth as well. So we had those kind of like these teeth, some drool happening. Again, I'm kind of like copying the kind of style reference that I had there. But immediately we kind of start to see a little bit more kind of shape happening in here. And then the same thing up here, I can start to carve out up here. Might use a bigger brush for this just to kind of get that kind of going. We want some of those outlines. And again, not too fussed about kind of how this is all coming together and where the shapes are and kind of cleaning this up to look good. I need a little bit more light on here where this arm is going to catch and kind of catch the light and give it a little bit of definition from the leg in front of it.
And you're just working in black and white now, like
I'm literally just working with the eraser here, right?
Yeah.
So if I kind of hide my background, you can kind of see that. It's literally just like, again, bringing in lights, bringing in some shading and trying to get that to kind of work in the way that I want. And like, yeah, just carving, you know, some shapes in, bringing that light in to kind of define those shapes a little bit more, pushing it back out to get the shape a little bit more clear, and just working exactly kind of in that way to block out all those kind of shapes.
Nice.
And again, anywhere where we've kind of got a little bit more definition required is where I can start to kind of bring in those kind of highlights back into this and kind of showcase a little bit more kind of shape definition into this. And it's a really kind of fun way to work. I really like kind of working with this because it's quite freeing, and you get some really kind of interesting results and maybe potentially some unexpected results as well.
Yeah. I actually have a few questions that I've missed. Sorry about that. So is using black and white essential here, or could you start with any color?
No, not necessarily essential. I find that it makes sense in my brain of like working with positive and negative space, which is what we're literally doing here. So black and white, it just like presents itself as the kind of the obvious thing to do. But you could definitely like, you know, work with something a little bit different if you were so inclined, or if you knew kind of what you were doing. We could just kind of work with this color and there's like, like a blue and maybe potentially a different color background. It would still work. I feel like my brain has an easier time processing these shapes when I'm just working with black and white in that way.
Yeah.
And there's something new because we're going for that kind of comic book style. There's something kind of nice about that as well, just kind of working in that way. So good question. The short answer is no, you don't really need to work just in black and white. You can work in color. But that's just a personal preference on my end.
But kind of duotone is the goal here, right? Like you really want to be using...
You want something a little bit lo-fi, not too clean and polished or colorful in that way. And you want to work with we're working with the lights and darks here. And so it makes sense to have just kind of this purity of light and dark in this particular illustration coming through.
Yeah, cool. Also, so another 2 questions actually. Is it better to design with a clear head or with a Bob Marley mindset?
I'm not familiar with the Bob Marley mindset.
I'm assuming that you just mean like clear, like silence, or would you want to do it with like a with music on, or you could be referencing something that we probably can't talk about on Adobe Live. You feel free to clarify that.
So I usually do, if the question is, yeah, in terms of like clear mindset with like, do I have an idea going into it, or am I listening to kind of music or anything like that? I most often listen to music whenever I'm creating like this. It just kind of helps me get kind of in that vibe. But if the question is in terms of like, if I'm going into this drawing already with an idea, or if I'm just kind of like white slate clean and just going in fresh with no kind of clear idea, I find that it's helpful to have some sort of a brief going into something like this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this technique is super cool, but it's also then, like, where do you stop? Like, where do you know when you've found something that you can kind of work with? I feel like that's a little bit like, okay, I'm going for this kind of creature type thing, so that's what I want to kind of do there. So definitely, I would advise kind of having that a little bit of an idea is a good thing to have when you're kind of going into this. If that's kind of the thought process behind that question.
Cool. Nice. Well, thanks for the question. I think there's another one as well. Any tips on maintaining the accuracy of the lighting?
That's the kind of one of those eternal questions of like, how do you get the accuracy of the lighting going into this? With this, I don't know that it's crazy important. Like this is quite a forgiving style. Like obviously in this particular piece, we've got the lighting kind of coming in from the top a little bit here, and there's like his whole kind of torso and his face are like dipping down, so we're casting a shadow. But in terms of the accuracy of this lighting, it's not like super accurate really in that sense. It's more just down to like a visual thing. So like, for instance, you can see here that there's this information that I've kind of added in here, where I've just added in a little bit of detail here of like the pectoral muscles and a little bit of the abs, even just like a hint of a collarbone right there.
Yeah.
Obviously, if the lighting was accurate and his torso is in full shadow, those things would not be there.
Right.
But I need them there because they kind of just give me that little bit of extra definition of what we're looking at and how it's working. So that's a great question. Like, do how accurate does this need to be? Not very. Like the anatomy here is pretty rough. The detailing is just kind of like, I don't know, it looks like he's just got some things growing on him. We're not sure what it is or what it just needs to look and feel that way. Which again is what I really like about this. Like, what the hell is this stuff kind of growing out of his back? Don't know, don't really care. It's not really something that requires a heap of definition at this particular point. Because it's just, it's stuff. He's a swamp thing kind of thing, so he's got stuff growing out of him, and that's kind of it. And just kind of,
nice.
What I would also do a little bit here, just to like extra play around with, is go up to filters and liquify, and just like warp this a little bit more, and just kind of play with it in a way that's just kind of help me. Maybe he's even more kind of like bent that way, or maybe his shoulder isn't quite so big over there and he's just kind of getting like this kind of thing. Like, there's a lot of freedom to be had with this kind of liquify tool. Obviously I've gone really off the rails with it there, but if I wanted to kind of make this shoulder a little bit less kind of pronounced, I could do that without necessarily having to redraw. Or if I was just kind of keen to pull this out a little bit more, any of these kind of things that kind of help you get the pose right, liquify is going to be really cool with that sort of thing. So definitely kind of have a little bit of a play around with that as well if you're so inclined. But yeah, that's basically the gist of this kind of main drawing element that I've got. We've got a little bit of kind of like a water thing behind him. I'm too lazy to draw the hand. So I'm just going to hide the hand as if it was kind of in the water.
Right.
And just get a little bit of a reflection going in there. So that's a really kind of easy hack to just like, oh, don't want to draw the water, don't want to draw the hand. No worries, just pretend like the hand is in the water and then it's disappeared.
You've spoken about that before in the past, right? Like when
yeah.
doing kind of like private work in particular, or like obviously even client work as well, if they're fine with it. But, you know, the detail and the time that you need to spend to make, you know, fingers and toes really, really accurate. If you're doing something fairly quick, or you want a bit of a time hack, or you don't have to draw all those things, or you're bad at drawing those things, or something, that you can kind of hide them behind other things. You don't have to draw the detail. And it's funny because I see that a lot in comic books. You see it all the time in comic books. Like you imagine how many times they have to draw hands, and it can't not look good. And you'll notice, you know, I heard someone talking about how they love drawing Captain America because everything's behind his shield. So they always throw things at Captain America. So they're like, yeah, because that's like 3 frames of him like blocking something with his shield and then throwing it again, and his hand's blurry, so they don't have to draw the detail. And they're like, that's 3 free frames that I'm going to draw really quick, which I find a really funny thing, that they would love to draw someone just because they're easy to draw.
Well, I mean, yeah, like nobody enjoys something if you feel like you're bad at it, right? So
Right.
being able to like draw it properly just makes you kind of enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool. So yeah, basically that's kind of our main kind of creature done. In the original one, I've kind of added this background element again, just to give it a little bit of a setting. So it's good to like ground your characters in a little bit more of a setting, gives it a little bit more context. The tree behind him is literally kind of done in the same way, just like a big old kind of swathe of coloring there. Like, and sometimes I'll even just kind of use the lasso tool and go real kind of rough, and just kind of work in that way, and then just fill that up and maybe drop the opacity a little bit so we can see our character coming through back into it, and then literally just come back in with a little bit of kind of an eraser tool, or just our lasso tool again, because that's what we're using for the background here, and just give it a little bit of kind of context and texture, show some kind of detailing in there. Hide that in the background there just real quick.
Yeah, that kind of moss and vines, like just so quickly you can do that.
Yeah, anything organic I think is super fun to do, because there's no like, we were talking about hands and stuff, like the hands are an absolute pain to draw because everybody knows what a hand should look like and what the proportions are. And so that can be really tricky to get right, whereas this sort of stuff is like, whatever, it's a plant, who cares? I'm not kind of defining a species here or anything like that. This doesn't need to be particularly accurate, which inherently makes it super fun to work with. Something else that I can do here to give it that kind of more comic book style and kind of give us this definition of like the character in front of the background of it, is I can come in and just make this into a halftone. So I've got a bunch of halftones already loaded in my library of shapes.
If your library wants to load.
If my library wants to load, that is, yeah. No. Okay. Cool. No worries. I'm just going to wing it in here. I'm just going to make this like a 50% gray. And I'm going to go into my filter, pixelate, color halftone.
I was going to say, I wonder if, okay, cool. You're not doing what I was going to suggest, so I'm going to say it anyway. But I was wondering, because I've seen you before, like almost doing like the, like distorting it by using a filter in the background. You might not want to do that because you're doing it quick and rough. It's already quick and rough. But I guess if you wanted to, like maybe you could do something like that. What was I thinking? Like you know how you can do like a mosaic kind of thing, but you can kind of change it so that it's random.
Yes, yeah. So you could apply a bunch of effects. And we did. I think we talked about some of this in the last stream that we did in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a little bit more kind of time consuming,
Mm.
and requires a little bit more kind of button pressing.
Yeah.
This kind of halftone effect is really cool, and it fits the vibe as well of what we're talking about here, which is like this just kind of comic book kind of look and feel. And then yeah, just a little bit of kind of, we got some highlights that we kind of added in as well in here. In the original one, we got some kind of fireflies kind of buzzing around him, just to give it, again, same thing. We've got a gradient. We applied a halftone to that. Again, just gives it that kind of like feeling of like comic booky, old retro vintage kind of comic book style.
Yeah.
But the crux of this really, I think, lies in this leading into something like this, and then working just with a black ink and then an eraser, bringing in shapes, carving them back out, asserting things, even just like the idea of kind of like where I put that face and that head, it makes a ton of difference in terms of like, if the head is down here,
Yeah.
you get even more of an idea of like, he's super hunched over now, right? Like, so there's a lot of things that you could do there just working with that native space.
Yeah, you put that head like way lower. Once you started drawing the head originally, I was like, whoa, it's way low. I thought it was going to be all the way up here. So it made such a big difference. I was like, oh, that's the shoulder. Like it all, again, that cloud kind of starting to take shape. As soon as you put two eyes and a bit of a mouth there, it completely changed what I was looking at. So it's super interesting.
Totally, yeah. And I think that's what I love about this, is just like that little bit of detail all of a sudden places the whole like body shape.
Yeah, totally. I'll let you know as well. We're about halfway because I ate into a little bit of your time with my stream key snafu.
No, that's all good. I'm ready to move on to the next one.
Nice, cool.
So that's that one. It's a bit of this one, as I said, is a little bit more of like, you've got a little bit of a block. You don't know really what to do or how to approach it. This technique can kind of free you up to do different things. And now I want to move on to something dramatically different, which is you've already got kind of a good solid kind of drawing, but you're not too sure where to kind of take it in terms of creativity and in terms of style exploration, right? So I've got this drawing here. Again, we're staying in the comic book realm of this. So I got this kind of Wolverine character that I started drawing with the symmetry tool. So the symmetry tool is something that I use quite often in Photoshop, and it's great for this sort of thing, where you're going to get like this really nice kind of shape happening in here. We can get some great, very, very quick and rough kind of Wolverine.
Abstract Wolverine. Yeah, I love it. Logan as a koala bear.
Exactly, yeah. It was like Minecraft Wolverine.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, totally.
So I've done that, and then I've edited a little bit. So we've got this kind of like half and half, like half masked, half unmasked, and he's really pissed because he's lost half his face.
Oh no!
But obviously that's grown back because he's the Wolverine. So we've got that, and it's like, all right, what can I do with this? What can I mess around with? Again, this series of streams is all about kind of messing around with different illustration styles, trying new stuff. Basically, once you're kind of at a certain level of drawing and you're comfortable with kind of creating these things, where can you take them? What can you do with them? And so this style is very kind of reminiscent of an artist that I follow that I love, which is a guy called Tristan Eaton, who's way, way, way better at me than doing this kind of stuff. I'm just kind of exploring a little bit. He's a veteran of lots and lots of this kind of stuff, and he does this really, really well. But there's an approach to this and kind of exploring for these streams of like me trying out this style, like how would I do this? How would I approach this? And one of the things that I kind of figured, which is really nice, is in order to get this kind of style happening, where there's this kind of like almost like pages out of a comic book that have been torn, and each kind of strip that's been torn has a different style kind of drawn by a different artist. How do I approach this? Where do I put what I need to put, and kind of what can I do here? And what I've kind of thought of in this instance is basically doing this, is have your drawing and then essentially just kind of make these shapes on top of it. And this is going to be the deciding map for my drawing. So I want something diagonal. It's quite dynamic. I've got a little bit of smoke happening in here. The colors here are just random. They're just for me to be able basically to make quick selections using the magic wand working in my file, right?
Right.
So it doesn't really matter what the colors are, as long as the colors are distinctive from their neighbors, you should be all good. So that's the main kind of idea here. And that's going to kickstart me into kind of getting this to look a certain way, right? So again, because we're kind of working with this Wolverine character, I also kind of wanted this diagonal, like looks like he's kind of torn his claws through it a little bit. It's kind of a nice action shot, really kind of dynamic composition. So now we can start to mess around with the different kind of style iterations. So for instance, let's say I'm going to turn on, let's say I'm going to turn on this one. No, I don't want that one. What's in here? My layers are a little bit of a mess. Again, because I've just kind of explored this. So we've got this one. All right. So we've got this style happening, which is very kind of like comic book basics kind of thing. We've got very dramatic inking, very solid drawing. So this is where obviously you would need a pretty solid foundation in drawing to be able to achieve this kind of style. But effectively, I've got that kind of working in here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select this kind of pink on this layer. And I'm going to go back into this one. And what I've done basically, let me just delete this mask, is in this group, I'm just going to now make a mask from that selection. So with that selection active, I just click on my layer mask and it just clips that down to that. So obviously I'm not losing any of the information. And if I decide kind of like I wanted more of it, I could just keep adding more to it and you won't see kind of any difference because we've got this mask clipping the whole thing there.
Right.
So it's just basically kind of hiding that drawing information and working in that way, but working from this layer, always going back to this layer to use my magic wand, make a selection, hide that, and then apply a layer mask to it, right? So this one gets that particular layer mask applied to it, and so on and so forth, right? So we can see, but because my shapes are a little bit kind of funky, we've got some gaps in between there. We're going to fix that later on and work in this particular way. So this layer's got this kind of more flat style that we worked on yesterday with that kind of Kobe Bryant illustration. Just using a lasso tool and very basic colors, we can achieve something really kind of cool and really nice with this. What I can also do on here is I can apply a little bit more of a kind of like a comic book style. So I'm going to go into filter, and I'm going to go to filter gallery, and I'm going to apply a sketch. Is it in sketch? No. Where am I? Sorry, my video is hiding what I'm trying to look at here. And sketch, halftone. There we go. Come on, out you go. And then I can play with the size of the dots to get this kind of like cool comic book kind of effect happening on there. And then I can change the color back to something a little bit more. Sorry, I think you can hear maybe my dog barking in the background. Yeah. So again, like this is all about these kind of different styles and different kind of collage-y vibes that we've got going on in here. And so let's kind of fast forward a little bit into this. So we're getting all these layers kind of in there. So again, we've got mask, we've got all these kind of different things happening in here. We're really working with those kind of flat comic booky kind of styles and trying to get that to work in that way. But one of the really other important things in here is trying to get a sense of kind of like lots of things happening. So I'm going to bring in a bunch of different assets that I've got ready-made. So obviously I've gotten these assets online. Technically speaking, if I was to use this for a professional brief, I would either have to get permission from Marvel to use these things, or I would have to create my own. For the sake of this, I'm just going to use a little bit of both. I'm going to use some that I got online and some that I've created myself to work with this sort of thing. But effectively, I kind of want some type happening in here. So let me bring in this PNG that I've got. And that's going to kind of sit in nicely into here. And so now I can, whoopsies, sorry. I can mess around with this. Let's pull this out of that particular group. I can place this in kind of different ways to kind of fill some of the gaps that I'm missing. So potentially this one also kind of wants to fit in like maybe here. Maybe it's just a little bit of an extra kind of thing happening in here. And I can kind of hide that in there, unlink the mask from the layer. And then I can move this layer within that mask to kind of work in that way and kind of fit within that thing. I'm not too fussed about kind of where this sits or how it's going to work, mostly because it's, again, this is all about just kind of collage-y vibes and working in that way. So where are we at here? We are here. Bang. What's going on here? Why are you being a pain in the butt? Yeah, so layer management is definitely a thing happening in this sort of style. And as you can see, I'm not like super good at figuring this out. But the idea is this kind of sort of exploration and playing with different scales, different patterns, different kind of ideas, so that we end up getting this kind of a result. All right, so now we can kind of dissect this layer properly, and we can see what's kind of happening in here, where I've just brought in a whole bunch of different assets, playing around with different clipping masks, different placement of those layers. We've got a texture clipping on top of this kind of smoky pattern, and we've just messed around with the whole thing. And now what I can do is I can come in and say, look, these kind of transitions aren't great. So I want to get something that's going to look a little bit like torn paper. So I've done these kind of rips in here, and they just kind of look like the kind of the torn edges of kind of paper, and they're just following that particular kind of line work that I've created there. So that's just a good kind of visual divider. It gives it a little bit more dynamic effect, and gives it a little bit more of an interesting kind of vibe to play with. And a lot of these things are then kind of manipulatable and movable around. However, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot of layer management. There's a lot of kind of illustration that's required, a lot of kind of thinking about where you're going to place what. This is a lot of work to kind of think of, which is why I've left this to the kind of the last, because this is probably the most advanced one. It requires excellent drawing skills in different styles, and it requires good knowledge of kind of layer management in Photoshop. But there is an easier way to do this, and it's this kind of thing. And so basically what this is a similar kind of concept, right? But instead of working in a kind of complicated way where I've got a lot of kind of detail, what I've done here is I've just blocked out different kind of things on different layers. So we've got this kind of clothing on here. We're working with a silhouette. So it's similar to what we did just now on the Swamp Thing one. We've just got a basic silhouette. Her hand here is in front of her leg, so it would disappear. So I've just cheated a little bit and added in a little bit of kind of detail in there just to kind of show some of those basic shapes. And now we've got almost everything that we need to have on this. And so what I can then kind of mess around with is I can come in with these different shapes and add them in as clipping layers. So let's go ahead and do just that. I'm going to make a new layer. And by default, you can see it's actually making that kind of layer there. So I'm going to just make that layer on top. And I'm going to hold down Option and hover in between the two layers, and it's going to make that into a clipping mask. And now what I can do is start messing around with kind of different textures. So just for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to take some of these textures that I had already ready to go, and I can make this into my kind of shape here. Command C, Command V.
Was that just a JPEG that you dragged in?
That's an AI shape, a vector shape that I
Yeah.
had
Okay.
ready to go.
Cool.
That
Gotcha.
I just dragged in as a JPEG, yeah. And so what you can see now is that that's kind of clipping to the shape underneath, but I wanted to just clip to the uniform there. So a little trick that you can do, which is, so it kind of saves time, is you can press Command or Control and highlight a layer, and it will just highlight and make a selection on the actual contents of that layer. So in this instance, we've got this kind of green thing here, and then
Right.
I can just make that into a mask. And
Oh,
then if
you
I
control
unlink
click it.
that, sorry?
Okay. Yeah. I just realized what you did. Okay. That's
Yeah,
cool.
command or control click on the actual thumbnail, and you can see this little kind of like selection square appears next to my finger. So this happens basically like on any kind of thing. So if you want to select all the stuff on that layer, normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to go to that layer, use your magic wand, select a thing, if you wanted something specific in that layer. But if you're happy to have the entire layer, you can just command click on the thumbnail and it will make a selection of that whilst you're still on your active layer. And then that allowed me to make a clipping mask to that. So this is clipping to the underneath, but I can also then move this around to just apply to certain thing here. And then I can kind of, let's say I want to get a little bit more color in here. So I'm going to use one of Carl T. Webster's halftone brushes. And I'm using a clipping layer on there as well. So that's kind of working in my advantage too. So let's go into the brush tip shape, texture. Let's scale this up a little bit so we get some bigger dots. That's cool. So because I'm working on a clipping layer, it's only clipping to this thing beneath it, right? And so it's a really kind of fun and easy way to get, like, let's say I want to put in some type in here. So let's say this is something for like some like cyberpunk Vogue edition or something. So I can place this in here and then just bang, smack it so that it clips down to the layer underneath it. So this
And
is
just just because
it's
it's a beginner stream, I just thought maybe we would just say like to do that, to put it to the you're just holding down Alt, aren't you? Once you
so
put
I'm
that
holding
type
down Alt or Option.
Yeah.
And hovering in between the layers there, right? So basically, if I make a new layer and highlight that, right? So at the moment, if I'll just undo it actually, and you can see, right? So that layer is now everywhere. It's just kind of visible on everything. But if I hold down Option and hover in between the bottom of that layer and the top of the next one down and click, what it will do is it will clip not to the layer immediately underneath it, but only to the layer at the very, very bottom of that stack. So everything is clipping to this.
Yeah, all those things with the arrow down is clipping to the the layer that doesn't have.
They're all going to this, like, I'll call this base layer. They're all hiding their information based on whatever layer is down at the bottom there.
Awesome.
Right?
Cool.
And so you can very quickly get a lot of really cool, interesting kind of things that are going to be a little bit more manipulatable. So this is just a little bit more of a manageable approach to this process without having to kind of get too crazy and worry about like, oh, where do I put what layer and how do I work that? And all this again is manipulatable. You can kind of change the colors of it. You can kind of do a whole bunch of different things to this as you need. So yeah, so you can just keep adding and adding and adding and adding, you know, like a bunch of different things to this and get basically something like the Wolverine thing that we were just looking at, but a little bit easier, a little bit more approachable, a little bit easier to manage.
Yeah, nice.
The main thing that I would say is, yes, the first thing is this idea of having this kind of like a shape that's going to go across the whole thing is important, right? So having that, and then having a bunch of assets ready to go that maybe you have created yourself beforehand. So in this instance, we've got all these kinds of different things and textures that I've created or gotten online. And you can start kind of placing them in. So it's not all about the drawing level of it. Some of it is also just about kind of like using stickers and placing them in. But it's a really like this is probably the most involved one of the 4 that we've kind of gone through on the stream. but it's one that I think is super fun and it has a lot of applications, and can be really, really interesting way of kind of developing a character for this.
Yeah, and if you had an illustration that you already had, you could just kind of take the outline or the base layer as you did here, and then just start adding some of this stuff in and just see what works. And I guess it's like a really creative way as well. Just like as you said, like adding, you can add vector, you can add graphics, you can get the paintbrush tool, you can add half tones, you could do a layer that has filters, different filters, and distortion techniques and stuff, and you can kind of be quite creative then that way, in that sense, and maybe breathe life into illustrations that are kind of already done, or find new applications of them, like other interesting ways to kind of mash things up. It's a bit like a mashup, isn't it? Yeah, it's really cool.
Totally. And so then I can just kind of take all of those layers. Like, let's say, for instance, I want to give him a little kind of claw mark. This is going to be really, really crazy. But I can then go ahead and, apply, oops, sorry. I'm going to apply an adjustment layer to this. This is a little bit more advanced. I'll just skim through this really, really quickly while we're just wrapping up. But we can get some kind of more interesting effects applying to the whole thing as well, and get that kind of like even more detail, potentially a bit too much detail, just applying to the entire layer there. But yeah, as you said, just really like I had a lot of fun kind of trying out this style and kind of messing around with what could be done and how it looks. I love the comic booky style of this.
It's very front page of a comic book like kind of thing. You'll see this sort of thing quite a lot if you ever read comic books or keep an eye out for this sort of thing. Yeah.
100%. So yeah,
very much Wolverine's claws, and then you see the reflection of the person that is like the antagonist.
He's yeah,
you see that sort of stuff in there very much. So yeah, sorry, did I interrupt you? Did you have something else?
No. That's it. That's the kind of the stream. So again, very just cool. Kind of looking at like ways to kind of push your illustrations a little bit further and experiment with different things. That's what these kind of two streams were about yesterday and today for me. Once you've, as you said, once you've got that drawing, what now? What can you do with it? What kind of technique can you mess around with? And I'm all about kind of messing around with different techniques and trying different things and see how it goes. And so all of these I have a lot of fun kind of working with and playing around with.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing all of that and all the different techniques today and yesterday. And guys, if you made it to the end of this video and you haven't seen the other one, go and check out the other live stream. You can watch it on demand. And there's other techniques there that you might want to check out. But that is it for this week for Adobe Live. Thank you, Dark Hours Co, for looking after us in chat and all of the questions that came through as well. And Live or On Demand, we'll be back, I think we're back next week with some 3D stuff. So that's going to be really cool. Jeremy, as always, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and hanging out with us on Adobe Live, my friend.
No problem. It's always my pleasure.
All right. Well, we are out. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time on Adobe Live.